Erde Essen is the latest film by Vienna-based Colombian filmmaker Laura Weissenberger. Since 2013, she has been active in theater and film and graduated from Anna Wiebrock's scenography class at the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna in 2019. Erde Essen, which has its world premiere at IFFR, marks her first appearance at the festival. Nina Power is a philosopher, teacher, writer and activist whose critical thought spreads through a porous web of practices and experiences linked to philosophy, feminism, art, politics, film, new technologies, and labor relations.
So, Laura,
Hi.
nice to see you, and thank you for your very beautiful short film, Erde Essen, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I suppose to eat soil or eating soil or
eating soil,
yeah, eating earth. I don't know, like Erde, earth, soil. Yeah, so the first question I really wanted to ask you about as a kind of theme in the film is this idea of unlocking, because obviously the opening scene starts with the male character, or one of the older male character, trying a whole series of keys in the lock and the door, and I suppose obviously metaphorically the idea of trying to unlock the origin of like a family past, or trying to come up with a story. And I think he's the one who also tells the stories in the film as well. It's the same man, right? So he's the kind of storyteller in a certain sense. And I'm just wondering if you could begin by talking about this question of unlocking, whether it's possible, or how far you think it's possible to see what's behind the door.
Yeah, I really love this scene because it was actually something that happened. So I went there to do my research, and this apartment that he's unlocking was the apartment where we lived when I was a small baby. And he told me that they haven't opened this apartment in a very, very long time. And I asked him if he could unlock it for me, and he said, oh shit, they haven't done it for a really long time, and he doesn't know where the key is. And then he came with this box of keys, and I think there were 100 of keys in it. And then he said he will try like every key for me so that I can go in this apartment. And I think it was the last key or something like that. Like we tried, I think, all of these keys to go in this apartment. And for me, this was such a crazy moment, that it's, yeah. So that's why that's why we reenacted this moment kind of. And yeah, and it felt, for me, it was like this moment where I got into this apartment. I felt like now I'm getting deeper into this story actually, and now I'm kind of step into a space which is kind of my past or something. And it was really in the beginning of this journey. And yeah, that's what I really felt super surreal, kind of, that this was really happening that way. Yeah. And also because I was thinking of the movie as kind of a movie about a house, which doesn't really exist that way, because all of these places are really split over Colombia. And it was kind of the it was kind of, I tried to make one place out of it, because for me my memory is kind of like a house, or like a place where I can go, and it has like this certain feelings and emotions and fragments, and that's why I like this scene as well, because I felt like, okay, you have to unlock certain doors to get to certain feelings and certain memories. And I also talked a lot to people, like also to my mother, and she told me about dreams that she had about houses that were abandoned, and that there were also often rooms that she didn't know that existed, and she kind of got there in certain points of her life, and she could unlock them. And for me it was really a nice image.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's something kind of very magical, realist about it. And, the dream aspect is obviously quite prominent throughout, and the kind of repeated scene of, let's say, the kind of the bride, or the woman in the bridal gown. And then, this question of, I mean, the question of whether, you know, one marries the right man as well. Obviously, there's a kind of, it's a sort of interesting mixture of the kind of the dreamlike and the kind of, you know, quite real, you know, the quite brutal, the sort of reality of people's lives, and question of, you know, perhaps regret or paths not taken as well. And I mean, I suppose one of the other central themes is obviously this question of earth or dirt, and, you know, the strange phenomenon of somebody eating, of the woman eating dirt. And I mean, there is a kind of medical condition where people, you know, they don't get enough minerals or something like this, and so they often eat earth or brick. And I think it's called pica in English at least. But you know, so there's a kind of, you know, but in a way, obviously, the film is not exploring the factual nature of that in a way, but it's a very kind of interesting juxtaposition of the kind of purity of the bride and then the scene with the dirt on her dress. And I'm just wondering if you could say a bit more about the you know, the status of earth, or is it dirt? You know, I mean, dirt is obviously a kind of judgment on earth in a certain way. It's a way of thinking about it. So I mean, how did this theme come about for you?
Like, actually, I took this character out of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, 100 Years of Solitude. And there's this character, Rebecca, who comes to the family, and nobody knows where she's from, actually. And she has this habit of eating dirt. And for me, it was kind of a habit of her trying to connect with the place she is, or trying to connect also with maybe the soil, the ground, maybe because she is kind of disrooted, or I don't know how to say that in English, like because her roots are not there anymore, and she tries to connect herself again with something that is solid, or with her roots or something. And that was my interpretation, kind of, and that's why I took this theme and I took this character, because for me it was kind of me trying to get in contact with my roots, and me trying to get in contact also with this land. And yeah, in Spanish you say tierra, and you mean also the land, you mean also my tierra is also my land, you know. And it's kind of, it has really to do with the earth itself. And so for me it was really this moment of eating, or giving this kind of feelings and memories back to myself. I think that's basically it. And with the girl, for me it was like, I went to all these places and I looked at the houses, and I looked what kind of objects and things there are, and I saw basically in every household there were these pictures of children, of girls mostly, in their communion dresses. And there were always like this communion dresses in a really like colonial style, and they look kind of like bride gowns. And for me it was so strange to see all these small girls, you know, in these bride gowns. And I had the feeling of, okay, maybe it's you know, because I'm not from a religious family, and I was never I did never a communion, and I was not baptized and all of these things. So for me it was kind of a strange thing. And I felt like, okay, maybe that's the first marriage with God, or I don't know. For me it was really strange, you know. And actually that's why I felt like, okay, it should be like this communion dress, but it looks like a bride gown, and it should also be that in a way. And as you say, it's kind of this purity, but also you have this strange feeling of also, it's kind of it has something gewaltvoll, I don't know the English word now, violent, actually, for me. Also because, you know, this religion, this Catholicism is not something that was invented there. It was something that the colonization brought over these people, and that's why I think I found this strange feeling of it has something violent, and it has something also wrong, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interestingly incomplete. So all of these different attempts, basically, it seems to me one way of reading the film could be to say, well, look, there are all these different possible routes into somebody's past or their family history. You know, you could go through marriage, through blood, you could go through soil, through land, you could think about those other ties. So religion as a kind of bind or a bond, but there's also the kind of natural world where you have the plants, for example, and the roots of the plants, and you know, the kind of keeping alive those roots. And then you have all of these points of disconnection. So when the woman attempts to leave Colombia and she is held at the airport, and you know, these kind of acts of separation and disconnection as well. And I suppose so there's this kind of, on the one hand, these possible types of bonds, and then the kind of severing of bonds and the separation of them. And so I think one of the interesting things about the film is the way it leaves them all incomplete, you know, and in a way perhaps the most coherent aspect of any of the what the characters are up to is the idea of storytelling. So you know, the older man tells the story, a couple of stories. Well, he tells a joke and he tells a story, you know, but he's in a way the one who's sort of trying to make sense in a certain way, like kind of tell a complete story, even if it's to the cat, you know, even if no one else is listening but this lovely cat who he's telling a story to, and the repetition of the family story with the woman and the two daughters who are separated, and then I suppose the counterpart of the older man for me was the older woman in bed who's watching television, and when the younger boy, maybe her grandson, comes in and asks if she could tell him a story, and she says, like, not now, you know, because she's kind of watching some Hollywood series, or she's watching Titanic, I think.
Titanic.
Is that right? Yeah. So she's already immersed in the story. And so I'm just wondering if there's a kind of, on the question of maybe gender and storytelling, to your mind, whether you have any thoughts about who gets to tell stories and what kind of story is being told, because at least in your short film, it's the man who can tell the story or wants to tell stories, and the older woman who at that point at least you know, doesn't want to tell a story, although later on there are other stories told by women as well. So, but they're more kind of fragmented, I think.
Yeah, I think in that regard for me was really interesting. Like, it was not like I went there and I had this intention to tell it that way. I think it was more that I went there and I got these stories, and for me they were all like pointing in a similar direction, and most of the stories were about the absence of a man, actually, or the leaving of a man, or the being left, or the trying to leave and not being able to leave, and stuff like that. So yes, yeah, it has something to do with gender, obviously, but actually not. Because actually, yeah, it's like that, like often men are being absent, and often women are being left in all of these stories. And it was for me really interesting also how it kind of repeats itself, the story again and again. But I wouldn't say that it was really intentional, that he is the only one who tells the story from the beginning to the end, because there's also like Monica, the woman in the beginning, who tells her story from her own perspective. But I found it interesting to have it like from a man and a woman, the same story, I think, because I also had it in real life. Like, I went to one of my family members and no, actually to several family members, and they told me the same story, actually this story, in very different ways. And it was really a different situation if it was told by a woman, if it was told by a man. And obviously they often took the side of the opposite gender, but also I had the feeling that they took the side often of the man, because they tried to, they tried to find a reason why things happened that way, and of course it's a crazy patriarchal system there, and yeah, well, I think it's what happens to a lot of women actually, that they're being left. And yeah, but I also liked kind of that of course the women are telling really sad stories, but in a way they're so strong as well, like while they're telling their stories. And yeah,
it's clear watching this film that you went there in a very receptive way. You were listening to the stories. It's not kind of overdetermined by sort of pre-existing ideas that you might have had about how you wanted the film or the stories within the film to be made. At the same time, there's a quite confident way you're approaching the actual filmmaking itself, you know, and the choice of images and so on. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your own process and the way you approach filmmaking as such.
Actually, I think I started with a really how can I say this? Like before I studied scenography, and I think my point of starting was kind of from the point of a scenographer in a way. It was a bit funny because I went there, I did research journey, and I did like the normal shooting. So before we started the shooting, I went there just to do research, just to meet the people, to scout the places. And actually I made a list of all the places I've been to, I want to visit, like all of the scenes I have in my head. But it was more like really tableaus. It was more like a setting, like a scene that I had, and it was not really the dialogue or anything. And I wrote down kind of the stories that I have in mind from that are really like important for me, or that are being told over and over again to me about our time there, and yeah, which kind of form my memories. And yeah, and then I went there and I took pictures of the places, and I made interviews and stuff, and it was all kind of a puzzling together, but more of out of this scenographic perspective in a way, because I started to collect I don't know, things that I saw in the apartments, in the houses. And yeah, I don't know, I kind of formed this house in my head, and it was more like that rather than really thinking about a structure of a movie. Because actually we also went there and we made all these scenes, but we didn't have a script or something. It was not like the story was before clear. It was more that we took all of this things that were happening, and we tried to get it as good as possible. And we had the scenes in our head, and we also took the people to the places and told them what to say sometimes, but sometimes it was also documentary. It's really a crazy mix of all of different things. And in the end, in the editing process, I was building this story. It was not that it was before there, I think. Yeah.
There's, I think, one of the aspects about being kind of confident as a filmmaker is also kind of leaving things incomplete or unsaid or ambiguous at a certain level. So trusting the viewer to, in a way, make up their own mind, or to leave various strands untied, if you like. So I think when one is watching your film, there's a sense of uncertainty to some extent about the fact or fiction aspect. You know, some of the stories obviously seem real, you know, that they really happened. Obviously the setting is very dreamlike. It's very kind of psychoanalytic in that way, the idea of rooms and the unconscious and all these different kind of explored or ancient places or old places that haven't been looked at for a long time, and the question of the family, and as you already said, the question of women and men in this relation. And I suppose thinking about the ambiguity of the film and how that relates to the audience, and you know, if there's anything you want to say about that kind of effect, the effect that you want to kind of have in that direction?
Yeah. So for me, it was really interesting as well to explore kind of, the different grades of fiction and nonfiction, because actually I'm like, I haven't done like a lot of movies before. I'm really new in that field actually. So for me, it was also, kind of a joy to explore how far you can go with trying to be documentary, but then in reality it's pure fiction and stuff like this. And also, I think, there is a lot of fiction in it, in the movie, and there's some things that happen during the fiction which are documentary, I think, because we kind of tried, for example, in the scene with Monica, with the woman in the beginning who is doing this exercise on this really strange apparatus. I don't know, I've never seen something like that before. And for example, with her, I tried to give her something to do so that she's really not thinking about herself talking. And I think it's a really simple tool, but I think it works kind of nice, because while she's doing that, she cannot really think a lot about what she's saying right now. And also, I kind of tried to give different stories to different people, so that they retell stories that are not their own, but because the stories are kind of, I don't know, I had the feeling that all of these people kind of understood the story and kind of could feel the story in a way, so that they could tell it as if it was their own. And that for me was so really crazy. Like I didn't know that it could work so well. Yeah. And it was kind of a research as well, because I it could have gone wrong completely as well, and that's why I was so happy that it worked. And because you're saying confidence, I think mostly the confidence came from my camera woman, because she, Sophia Wiegele, like she's really crazy, like really good in finding the right pictures. And and I think she helped me a lot, because I just told her what I had on my mind, and she found the perfect picture, and she found actually what was in my head even better, and it was really I think a good way of working together, because we were like just three women together on this journey, and we know each other like for a long time, and so we could really talk a lot about what was happening. And also we were really spontaneous, because she had the camera with her, and Marie Sturminger was always with the recording, with the Zoom recorder. And so actually we were really spontaneous. And when there was a situation that I felt like, okay, that's documentary, but it's really fitting in of what I want to tell, we were quickly in kind of recording that. And that was kind of a really beautiful way of working as well, because we also lived always with the people, like with my family members and this friends and stuff. And kind of it was really a diving into this different houses and homes.
Great. So maybe the one final question to wrap up, in that sort of looking forward, and obviously everyone's in this very uncertain situation, and anyone kind of making more or less any kind of creative work is probably has some obstacles in one way or another, depending on what what people are making. And I'm just wondering how you sort of see your future in filmmaking. And obviously you're, as you say, kind of at the beginning, and I think probably this process, making this film, was very informative, and it's a very, as I say, like accomplished film already. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the process and how you kind of came to this synthetic work, really working with others and working with people you met in Colombia. And so I'm wondering about future projects that you have, or maybe things that you're working on now that you'd be prepared to talk about anyway.
Yeah, actually, I started to study at KHM in Cologne. It's like a media school. So that's very, very cool, and I'm really happy that they took me actually. So I think now that's the best base to start working a lot more with film, of course. And right now I'm researching on a mythological figure that's called Baubo. I don't know if you know it. It's yeah. And I kind of, that's the next project actually I'm working on. And it's all, again, kind of a searching for something or a gesture, or kind of a searching for this or after this mythological figure. And I don't know, I feel like that this way of working that I started with this movie, with Erde Essen, is something that really comes natural to me, and that I really like to gain all of these different associations and get all of these different things together. And I think I could make it even more, I don't know, develop it even further and make it to something even, I don't know, try to become better in that way of working, maybe. Yeah.
I don't know if you just want to say a couple more words about Baubo, the figure of Baubo, just
Okay. Yeah, actually, I discovered it during reading a book about the female genitalia. It's called Vulva, from Mitu Sanyal. And it's a figure of the Demeter mythos. And it's kind of being forgotten because it's older than the, I don't know, average Greek mythology that was being retold, and because I think it was part of a hymnos that got lost. And the really interesting thing about Baubo is that she does this gesture. It's called anasirma, and it's basically she shows her vulva to Demeter. And this gesture is something that's been forgotten for a long while, and it had a certain meaning which we don't really know anymore, and we don't know the power of this gesture. We don't know the meaning of this gesture. And for me, it was really something powerful and beautiful to have like a goddess, or to have like a figure that feels no shame, and that feels and it gives power through showing her body. Yeah, basically that's what I found really beautiful, and that's what I wanted to give back to an audience and try to explore